This is why the nurse's question changed my life, because she asked me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you? Up until that point, I didn't consider myself as someone who is stressed because I was just trying to be positive. I can handle it, right? If you blame the weather for why it's too hot outside, so I'm miserable, well, you can't change whether it's hot outside. You're now a victim to your circumstance. In order to become aware of what's actually causing our suffering, we have to understand that we can no longer blame our circumstances. The results are dictated by our behavior, the actions, right? If you want to improve, if you want to make a bigger impact in the world, then that means doing things that influence other people. You can't just think about having an influence in the world. You've actually got to go do something, right?
Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization. Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Mitch, we're stoked to have you, and it's extra special to be doing this in person. So glad that you're here.
Thank you. It's so fun to be here.
Yeah, this is I've known you for a couple years now, Mitch. It was our first time meeting in person. So heard a lot of stories from Matt too. And so I'm just thrilled to be in the room with you.
We have lots of stories. Hopefully we'll share a lot of them today.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is a special time. Like we were reflecting before earlier just about how crazy connections are and how so much of this has come from LinkedIn and like how many people we now know because of each other and because of LinkedIn. And then today's one of those days where we get to meet in person some of these people that we've never met before, and it feels like we know. So it's awesome. Well, so Mitch, you've been on the podcast before, and it was a long time, but it actually was 2 years ago when we recorded that one with Nate Randall. So, and by the way, for our listener, if you haven't seen or listened to the Nate Randall episode with Mitch and I, like you got to go listen to it. It's the craziest story ever. Like, what if Brad never said, go follow Nate Randall? Like,
incredible, yeah.
We would not be sitting here right now.
One decision can change the entire course of someone's life.
Yeah. So we love to ask people about their understanding and or definition of leadership. And Mitch and I have an inside joke for our listeners that the best like content producers are the people who are the most secure about what they talk about. They just ignore the question and talk about whatever they want anyways. So I'm almost like not even going to ask you a question.
Just planning on him not.
Yeah. Just sure. I want to hear. I actually do want to ask you so that you can just answer it, not even according to what I asked. And I'm curious, like you obviously work with a lot of high performers is probably what the world would label them as, people who are in leadership positions, and curious like your take on that. So for our listener, Mitch is a one-on-one coach, one of the best in the world, and works with a lot of really amazing people. And so I'd be curious your take on like what you've seen or learned or understood as you've worked with people who are like they're leaders by the world standards and probably by our standards as well.
Ironically, I have a master's degree in leadership.
Yeah.
And I learned hardly anything in that master's degree. It's one of the biggest wastes of money I ever spent. But everything I learned about leadership came from going through hard things and getting on the other side of those things. And so when I think of leadership, I think of first self-leadership, doing the work of I, so that then we can do the work of we, which are the immediate people around you. And then you can transition to the work of all, which is to have a worldwide impact or an expanded impact. And leadership really is, to me, becoming who you really are, which is the highest, most powerful, best version of yourself. And the world of self-help will teach you that the process of becoming is to decide who you want to be and then become that. And a lot of that is based on becoming better. 1% better every day is 37 times better over the year. If you compound that, then you'll, become a compounded version of yourself. And then the other part of it is to fake it till you make it, to just decide who you want to be and start being that person, which is often a reflection of other people in your life. It's why people click so much on the morning millionaire routine and like start patterning their life after someone like Elon Musk that they've never met, they probably will never met, has very little relevance to their life, but they think I want to be like that person because they're successful. And success is defined differently to every person. Success, simply defined, is getting what you want, and what you want changes, right? But so success is getting what you want, but leadership is becoming who you are. And so the difference between success and leadership is the process is not by becoming better, but by returning to who you really are, by letting go of everything that's not you. And the way I really visualize this is Michelangelo speaking about his famous statue, the David, which is also known as the perfect man. And I love that because he said, I didn't sculpt David. I took everything away that wasn't David. And so what this means is that the perfect man was already inside, but it was being hindered or obstructed from the things that weren't the perfect man. And I believe that deeply that who we really are is the perfect, most highest, most powerful version of us. And it's about letting go of everything that's not us to reveal that person inside. And this becomes really clear when you just look at a child's life. When you watch a newborn. Now, one of the funny things I could ask you, I don't know everything about you, but one thing I can be fairly certain about is that, and I'll ask you, were you once a newborn child?
Yes.
Yeah, you as well.
Say I was.
Okay, yeah. Which is, we laugh about acknowledging that, but it's a really important thing to acknowledge. Because when you realize that you were once a newborn child, which you don't remember, you've observed other newborns, right? Your own kids. And the newborn doesn't have to get up early, even though they do, unfortunately, sometimes. They don't have to read 10 pages. They don't have to hop in a cold plunge. They don't have to get exercise in to be primed and feel powerful or at peace. A newborn doesn't learn how to be at peace. They actually, throughout the next few years, learn how to suffer. Our natural state is the perfect, whole, curious, loving, and deeply present version of ourselves. And so to me, that's what leadership is letting go of everything that's not you and just being who you really are, which is the highest version of yourself.
Yeah.
Did he answer your question?
Yes, actually, that was pretty good. And but you would still be kind. No, that's beautiful. Okay, talk to us a little bit more about that, because again, in the world or in society, like oftentimes, and leadership is impact, like also, and how does impact or someone that wants to create a movement or have like an influence in the world, how does that connected to someone's ability or like when they're able to return to more who they are or become more?
Yeah, everybody is way more impactful than they realize. You're having an impact every moment of every day. It's an impact for good or it's an impact for bad, because we're all creating outcomes that are aligned with who we really are or misaligned. In other words, desired outcomes or undesired outcomes. And our outcomes or our results are dictated by our behavior, the actions, right? If you want to improve, if you want to make a bigger impact in the world, then that means doing things that influence other people. You can't just think about having an influence in the world. You've actually got to go do something, right? And that could be like joining a nonprofit. That could be creating a business. That could be showing up in your community or in your faith and just turning outward to help other people. But then also your health, your spirituality, your relationships are all different outcomes that we want. Finances. We all want these things. And we all also already have these things, right? We all have health. Either it's good or it's bad. It's improving or it's declining. We all have money, a little bit or a lot of it, right? We all have relationships. They're either connected or disconnected. We have spirituality that's either deep or shallow, and we have an impact for good or for bad. And so that's the results or the outcomes that we're always having in our lives. And those outcomes are driven by our actions, the things we do, and our actions are driven by our emotional state. And this is what's missed so much in this world. We focus on actions. We all want to be told what to do. And so we, dive into books that teach us how to create systems and to develop habits and to get our actions on autopilot. So it just becomes a part of what we do, while completely missing the fact that when you're in a powerful state, how hard is it to go to the gym or go on a run?
Not very hard.
When you're in a powerful state, how hard is it to say sorry or I love you to your family members? Right? Everything that you want in your life, the impact that you want to have, happens naturally when you're in a powerful state. When you're in a suffering state, how hard is it to go to the gym or go on a run?
It's a lot more difficult.
Right? Yeah. And how hard is it to have the courage to apologize to a loved one when you're in a suffering state, when you're feeling resentment or anger or misunderstood? And how easy is it when you're in a suffering state to blow your money on stuff that you don't actually want?
Right.
Because of the dopamine hit, right? But when you're in a powerful state, that's not an issue. And so instead of focusing on, how do I have an impact, which comes from what do I do to have an impact? I would suggest, how do I become who I really am so that my impact flows out of me and is my natural way of being?
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things that I have loved like taking on the most is that when I talk about this now, it feels way more fun and way more free, way more doable, way more like functional to become more of who we've always been than try to become someone we're not. That feels heavy and feels like an upward climb that is a grind and almost like a force type of thing. So
It's not natural. It's not natural to turn something in nature into something. You don't turn a goldfish into a raccoon. That seems impossible. It is impossible, and it's really challenging. So why would you want to be Drew, and why would Drew want to be Matt?
Yeah,
You don't.
totally. Can you do you have some examples from yourself, clients, whatever, about because I know one of the questions that comes up for people when they start to hear this is like, well, you still got to do something, and you just described like, yeah, you got to take action. Well, do you have some examples, stories that you can share around like someone who has engaged in doing the work to become more of who they've always been and kind of letting go of that resistance, and then like what did they go create, or like how did that actually turn into like the impact that they had been wanting to create and weren't able to before?
Yeah, I think one of my clients had the same desire to have a big impact in the world and to do the things that he knows that he wants to do. His language would have been when we met the things he thinks he should do, right?
Yeah.
And that's never the case that we should do anything, but we can if we want to. And by the end of our coaching, after 12 weeks, he wrote a testimonial and he sent it. I have it in my email. I haven't posted it yet. And I don't have it fully memorized, but I think pretty close because of the impact that it had on me to see the impact that he was now having in the world. He, to give you context, this individual, without me knowing, took out a loan to work together. And with him, he and his wife, like within 1 hour of our consultation, they were just like, we're doing this. And they made it happen. And what I also didn't know is that they were $124,000 in debt. Found this all after. And with that context, which I think really matters, he said, my wife and I now agree that working with Mitch was 7 times the value of what we paid, which is incredible considering his challenging financial circumstances. And the reason why he said this is because the impact it started to have on his life. And it wasn't me, it was the principles of becoming, right? And rewiring his brain to let go of everything. It's not him, so he can be who really is. He said, I started a new business. I got a $26,000 raise. I negotiated my paternity leave to protect my values. So he got paternity leave that he wouldn't have otherwise had. He lost 20 pounds and he picked up a new hobby with friends, and he also made new friends. That is so exciting, so incredible. And those are the sexy outcomes that we all want to have in the world. That's my least favorite part of the testimonial. My real favorite part is what he said next. He says, none of this takes away from the time I now spend being deeply present with my wife and my kids. That's what we really want. That's the impact. There's no greater work than the work within the walls of our own home. And so the first impact that we want to have is first, when we talk about leadership, is this work of I, which is to become the perfect man, the perfect woman, the David inside. And then our natural next thing is to just, because of it's who we are, we love and we build and we serve and we give and we create within our home. And what we avoid is the type of regret that, most of us fear of having at the end of life, where, I was just last night and this morning, it's my grandma's 81st birthday. And I spent 2 hours with them last night, just sitting on the couch. And my grandma is coloring books with her newfound passion and her incredible collection of pens. And my grandpa's reading the paper. Sometimes we were talking for those 2 hours, and sometimes we didn't need to. We would just, sit and enjoy each other's presence. And at one point, considering that my grandma was about to turn 81 and my grandpa's 85, I asked, hey, Grandpa, what do you think about getting old? And he just busted up laughing. And I said, no, seriously, like, what do you think about getting old? And he said, it's the pits. It's what it is. And Grandma, without even looking up from her coloring book, she chimed in. She said, it's definitely not the golden years. And we were all laughing about it. And then he got very serious. And he got really quiet. And he said, I'll tell you what. And then he choked up. And in that pause, I noticed that his eyes were welling up with tears. And he said, when you have a wife as incredible as mine, it's great. And I just wanted to sit in that moment for as long as I could. The love was palpable. It was just one of the most precious things, with tears in his eyes, and the love that I could feel between them, which is over 60 years of marriage. And then my grandma chimes in, or no, he says to my grandma, he says, your grandma is very patient with me, aren't you, dear? And she goes, yes, I'm very patient. She's like, I'll never deny that. I'm definitely very patient. And we were busting up laughing again. And I just love how the impact that matters most is within the walls of our own home. Because when I look at them, I think like their kids, their grandkids are out and about doing their things, and they're in their recliners, just hanging out with each other. They are what they have. And so if we can have the kind of impact with the people closest to us, that's what's going to carry us to the end of life. But then beyond that, we now have the capacity, because everything can be running smoothly if we're deeply present in our family and we're loving and giving and serving. And the ones that we love, when we stop suffering, when we let go of the resistance in our life and become who we truly are, they also have space to love, create, build, serve, and give. And it's like, for me, and we can talk about my story, but when I went from living a 9 out of 10 stress life that I found out at the doctor's office, to now spending, according to my wife a few weeks ago, 30 minutes a week in a suffering state instead of a powerful state each week. My wife picked up kickboxing. I would have never known that she had this dream within inside her that she didn't even know, that she loved to punch bags. And it's so fun for the people that you love to have the space to not have to support you in your suffering, because you are who you are, and you can encourage them to see that through the lens of possibility and to show up in the way that they've always wanted to, because they're not pulled down by the suffering that you're carrying. And then outside of that, we just naturally start doing the things that we don't have to do, but that we want to do because it's fun, to use the word that you're using. It's just fun to make a difference. It's fun to make invitations. It's fun to create events. It's fun to, serve in your community and in your church when you're not weighed down from self-doubt and hesitation and overwhelm and stress.
Okay, so I'm sitting here hearing all that, and for a listener who's saying, but how do I become perfect? How do I uncover that? What would you tell them? And then there's probably not enough time to dive into all of it.
Yeah.
And like, where would someone start? Where does someone start if they're like, okay, I know there's this powerful version of me deep in this block of marble. Like, how do I start carving away and chipping away so I can be him or her?
Yeah. So this doctor's office that I referenced is the moment that ended up pivoting the way I lived the rest of my life, because this nurse in this new patient form asked me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you? And I thought about it sincerely. I said, probably a 2 out of 10. And what was happening in my life at that time, it's like I'm serving as a leader in my church. I am working in a job at the largest company in the world, in a role that many people take 12 to 15 years in their career. I'm married to my best friend. I am getting a master's degree in leadership at the time. And I have my first child. So from the outside looking in, everything's perfect. It's awesome. So much to be grateful for. And my wife interrupted right after I answered the nurse's question. She said, "You're kidding, right? You're like a 9 out of 10 in your stress." And my cheeks went red, as they easily do. Probably are right now. Exactly. And I just, said, yeah, probably a 9 out of 10. And we just moved on, because that woman, poor nurse, was not a therapist. She didn't get into that, right? She wasn't the one that needed, yeah. And a few weeks later, I was talking to one of my mentors on the phone, and he said, listen to me. You're Mitch Whiting, which meant something to him. And at that time, it didn't mean as much as it does to me now, because what he said next, he says, do you realize you view yourself as a wounded bird? You're one of the greatest leaders I've ever met. You love people in a way I've never seen. You're a high achiever, but do you realize that you view yourself as a wounded bird? I knew he was right. I had no defense. And it shocked me, because I'm Mitch Whiting, and you're Matt Harrington, and you're Drew Norton. Like, we are who we really are, the most powerful version of ourselves. We're full of love and light and passion. And I was living this suppressed version of myself. And so I dove into all the things that I always thought would solve my problems, which is the world of self-help. And I realized that I wasn't happy or fulfilled by reading another book. It wasn't by, and I ultimately realized that self-help is perfectly named because it's helpful. It's great. Like every time you read it, it pumps you up. You feel motivated, you feel inspired, but it's temporary. And what I ended up discovering after diving through more books is I realized what I was really missing was the manual to the greatest technology of the universe, which is our human brain. I didn't know how the brain worked, and so I started studying principles of neuroscience. And with the 20 years of obsession that I had with self-help, as well as, as a Christian, as a man of faith, constantly pursuing understanding truth and fulfillment, this neuroscience ended up unlocking permanent change for me. And the permanent change is what I now call self-transformation instead of self-help. It's a play on this word self-help because the difference between self-help and self-transformation is self-help is temporary while self-transformation is permanent. It's the difference between reframing your thoughts and rewiring your brain. And so why would we need to rewire our brain? Well, because we talked about our outcomes are driven by our actions, and our actions are driven by our emotions. And if we're in a powerful state, we're flying high, life is great, we're having an impact we want. If we're in a suffering state, we're not. It's impossible to create powerfully from a suffering state. Well, our emotions are driven by our beliefs. A belief is the meaning you assign to your experience. And so the first thing in order, if you want to become perfect, which there's like a Greek or Hebrew translation for the word perfect, which really means whole.
Right.
If you want to become whole like you once were, then the work is to become aware of how much you're suffering. And this is why the nurse's question changed my life, because she asked me on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you? Up until that point, I didn't consider myself as someone who was stressed because I was just trying to be positive. And plus, I wanted everybody at work and in my life to see me as someone who's got it. I can handle it, right? I was living as strategic self instead of real self. I was using positivity as an escape from truly healing. And so this question now that I would shift high performers away from traditional metrics of more success and more achievement. And by the way, this leads to more success and more achievement, is to ask yourself, how much am I suffering on a weekly basis? And to do that, you have to understand that there's two emotional states. There's a suffering state and a powerful state. And we're in one of these states at a time, never both simultaneously. We just bounce back and forth. And you can equate it to the autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic or powerful state, or the sympathetic suffering state, which is rest, digest, and recover versus fight, flight, or freeze. In other words, we bounce back and forth from an emotional state that's useful, that feels useful, and an emotional state that doesn't feel useful. And if there's 112 hours per week in the week that we're awake, I just pretend everyone's sleeping for 8 hours. I know that most people aren't, especially if you have kids. Then you have 112 hours left. And the question is, how many hours, and you can, in your audience listening right now can ask themselves and pause this and say, how many hours per week am I spending in a suffering state? Or the answer is the same to the second question. How many hours am I not in a powerful state? And if you'll calculate that for yourself, you may be surprised, or I should say alarmed, but not surprised. Alarmed because you've been putting on this, this best version of yourself, your best foot forward, while ignoring the healing or the transformation that would end up unlocking who you really are. But not surprising because it's like, well, yeah, you're experiencing resistance in your life. You're experiencing self-doubt or stress or overwhelm. So the first thing is to become aware that you're in a suffering state, and then to begin to learn how to identify the beliefs that are actually creating all of your suffering.
That's when the change happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. Why do you think people struggle to just like even be aware of suffering?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest reason is because we naturally blame our circumstances for the reasons why we suffer. And even as a parent, I have to fight to not blame circumstances for suffering. Like, for example, if, my son says something to my daughter, or my daughter says something to my son that's not kind, then it's like, I want to say that made them really sad, right? Or like, hey, when you don't listen to me, it makes me sad, for example. And I'm like, no, that is not true. Like, we all have, and I share the story of Matilda. If you've ever seen the movie Matilda, author Roald Dahl wrote the book, and they made an amazing movie. And I grew up watching it and just love it because a belief is the meaning you assign to your experience. And just because, and your beliefs are what create your emotions. And I'll come back to circumstances. I'll share that Matilda was told by her parents, who abused her verbally, and even like they locked her in her room a lot. They would say, I'm big, you're small, I'm smart, you're dumb, and there's nothing you can do about it. They would always say that, which just makes her, if she believed that, would make her feel like there's nothing I can do that's good in this world. I'm worthless. I'm not capable. I'm stuck the way I am, which is often in different language, the language that we have in our own brains, which is, I can't do this. I'm not capable. This isn't who I am. I'm not good enough to be able to do this. And the reality is we can, and there is always something you can do about it. It's not true that there's nothing you can do about it. Because she chose that, you could say her parents made her sad by doing that, but it didn't make her sad because she chose to believe something else, that she was powerful, so much so that she realized that she even has superpowers. She realized that she can solve any problem and that she can learn anything, so much so that she read every book in the library. And long story short, she ends up saving her school from an evil principal, also saving her teacher from that same evil principal that was her family member, her aunt. And as a result, her teacher that loved her ended up getting her inheritance that she was supposed to get from her dad, which included this beautiful mansion. And this teacher ended up adopting Matilda and inviting her to come live in this beautiful home. So because of this little girl's ability to not believe the lies that could have made her sad, the behaviors of her parents, instead, what she did was she found out what was true about herself. And when you know the truth makes you free. You move back to a powerful state instead of being in a suffering state. And as a result, you go do things naturally as a leader that you would have not done from a suffering state, which is stand up to the principal. In her case, use her power to change everyone's life around her. But what's so cool is the outcomes that we talked about earlier. The outcome she got was she went from an abusive family to the loving family she had never had, but always dreamed of. She went from this home of chaos to this beautiful mansion, which is, I just think, is even symbolic, right? She changed everything. She had, her whole school loved her. She had all the friends in the world. She had this deep connection with everyone. And so everything that she really wanted in life came simply because she was in a powerful state, simply because she believed what was true. But coming back to this circumstance thing, is that the things outside of us, other people like her parents or people in our lives, are outside of you and outside of your control. They're called circumstances, the things that are outside of you, outside of your control, and are facts. They're neutral facts. It is what it is. Well, we can't change other people. We can't change the weather. We can't change our past, which are all circumstances. And we sure try to change other people, but it doesn't work. And when you realize that circumstances are neutral, in other words, they don't create your emotions, then you answer certain questions very differently. One of the questions I like to ask is, does death make people sad? What would you say? Just on first glance,
society would say yes.
Everyone would pretty much say yes.
Yeah.
And it's not actually accurate, because if you consider, let's say someone you love deeply passed away a few hours ago and you don't know about it. How do you feel right now not knowing about it?
You don't even react.
Yeah, unless you're Yoda and you feel the disturbance in the force, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't feel anything, yet death happened. So the circumstance happened and you don't feel anything, meaning it could not have created your emotion. But once we find out, then we start experiencing something that we call thought. We start to assign meaning to our experience, which is our beliefs. And all of a sudden we're flooded with emotion, deep emotion. And it could be grief, which is sadness based on loss. It could be regret, right? It could be that I wish I would have spent more time with them, or I wish I would have said sorry, or I wish I would have said I love you more. There's a whole variety of emotions, and that's also cool that we experience different emotions, because if your circumstances create an emotion, then death would create the same emotion in everybody. Every time.
Right.
And instead, and imagine that this person that you deeply loved was your 101-year-old great-great-grandmother who'd passed away holding your hand while singing your favorite song together after 30 years of kind of wanting to get to the other side to see your husband again, and after a 20-year battle of cancer. How do you now feel about death?
Peaceful, happy, right?
The same circumstance in terms of death happened, but yet you feel positive emotion. And so when we stop blaming our circumstances for our emotions, one, we're accurate, we're in reality now. But then two, you get your ability to choose back. If you blame the weather for why it's too hot outside, so I'm miserable, well, you can't change whether it's hot outside. And so therefore you can't change if you're miserable. You've now given up your ability to choose. In other words, you're now a victim to your circumstance. And so in order to become aware of what's actually causing our suffering, we have to understand that we can no longer blame our circumstances. Instead, we want to be responsible for everything in our life, and responsibility is your ability to respond. And that's what happens when you separate your circumstances and start seeing the belief, this very specific language in your brain that's actually creating your emotional experience, that's then driving your actions, that's then creating the results in your life.
It's awesome. Mildly disappointed you didn't talk about Kung Fu Panda. It's okay. Matilda's a great example as well, containing all the keys to the universe.
I do believe that all the secrets of the universe are contained in Kung Fu Panda 1 and 2.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We'll have to talk about that on the next episode.
In my experience, as I have become more and more aware of what you're discussing today, what you're sharing today, it's just so good. It's like, I don't know about our listener, but I feel like it's a cheat. This is like a cheat code.
Mm-hmm.
So as I've become more aware of it, I find it all over, which is cool. It's really reassuring because, and if you're listening to this wondering like, is this one of those like, is this some kind of like voodoo mind trick, or like, is this one of those like stoical things on Facebook? It's like, no. Like what I know you to be, and I strive to be as well, as like anchored in what's really true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not ours. Like we talk about that frequently, right? And that's a beautiful thing. And I see it everywhere. It's in scripture. It's in stories. It's in a book written by some guy called Matilda. It's in, Kung Fu Panda. And that's really cool. And even just for a listener listening today, I believe they could go start to see some of these principles all around them if they now go look for it.
Ultimately, the path of becoming who you are by letting go of everything that's not you, which is the suffering that we're experiencing based on the beliefs that we believe that are not true. All suffering comes from one thing, and it's believing things that are not true. Then what happens is it's the most human experience is to become who you really are. And then what happens is that you start having the impact that you always wanted to in the world, which is the hero's journey, right? We want to overcome the suffering like Frodo and Bilbo Baggins did in Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter did in Harry Potter, or in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker. Like all these stories, which are so human that we love so much, are really people overcoming the suffering, getting on the other side, and then because they're in a powerful state, fulfilling the mission and purpose that they have on earth, which is to have an impact on other people. The ultimate form of becoming is to become someone who helps other people to become, is to be able to turn outward regardless of your circumstance, because that's who you are.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Thanks so much, man. It's been so fun. Thanks for sharing. And this is all stuff that's near and dear to me, and it's just awesome for me to sit here and just listen to it all over again.
Yeah, if anyone wants to learn more, they can go to mitchwhiding.com, and there's a free assessment for your audience, which is called the Passion, Purpose, and Progress Assessment. And what it does for people, if this content resonated with you, then the assessment can be the type of experience like I experienced in the doctor's office, where you have the ability, there's like a calculator part of it where you can calculate how much time you're spending in a powerful state and how much time you're spending in a suffering state, but also there's language that will help you understand in words what you've been experiencing for years and potentially decades. And it's amazing to have that kind of clarity. And then for those that it really resonates with, they'll be given access to my calendar, and I'm happy to hop on a one-on-one consultation to get really clear on where they are, where they want to be, and what it takes to actually create that for themselves.
Yeah.
Where else can they follow you?
On LinkedIn. I create content on LinkedIn.
I need that answer, but
yeah. Mitch Whiting on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Yeah. And again, for those of you who are listening that didn't listen to the first time we had you on the podcast, following Mitch on LinkedIn may very well change your entire life. Not because of Mitch alone, and that will too, but it's just like you just never know. So
you never know.
Follow Mitch on LinkedIn and see what can be created when you're plugged into that community on LinkedIn. It's amazing. All right, thanks, man.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. So fun.
Thanks, Mitch. To our listener, today's the day.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further,
Subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.